lancer aujourd'hui. La solution qui vous permettra d'atteindre cette réussite durable. Mesdames et messieurs, je me présente, mon nom est Jeanne, je suis accompagnée de mes collègues Roland et Emmanuel et ensemble nous formons le consultant 3P, for People, Planet, Profit. I will continue the presentation in English, but my French accent will remain. That being said, we're here today to determine a business growth strategy for Maru's chocolate company that will increase your cocoa production and set a framework for long-term expansion. In order to achieve this, we established 3 key issues that are written right here. The first one being the fairness of disseminating value of added model. Second, the failure of Maison Maru for expansion, especially the one in Hanoi that has currently many problems going on. And the third one, the limited control of the supply, especially the problem with the fact that it's only 0.1% of Vietnam, and that you have a problem with the producers and the fermenters that we will discuss later on. Our recommendation that we're really excited to propose to you today is to restructure the handling of operations from beginning of supply chain to the end. It's from farmers to customers. Our recommendation will be divided in 2 different portions, the first one being more focused on the beginning of the value chain and the second one on the end of the value chain, which we'll discuss later on. Now, let's dive into our analysis. We are here today to answer 3 specific questions that you gave to us. First, how can we give more value to producers? Is this something that you currently have an issue with? The second one, what to do with the Hanoi store, the current situation there, what can we do to improve it? The third one, how to expand internationally and how this should be done right now or maybe in the future. In order to answer those questions, we also need to consider your stakeholders in this situation. The first one being the producers who care about their land and who also care about their wealth. Second one being the fermenters who also care about their wealth and their business that's going on right now. Then you have your customers. Your customers care about the value added of your company. You're a company that's not like any other chocolate company. You actually add value, and this is why customers are ready to pay a bit more for your chocolate. And you also have your employees. Your employees care about working for a purpose-led company, which is something you do, and they care about working with you because you do this for them. And finally, you, the shareholders, the 4 of you, you care about the viability of your business, as well as maintaining the current business model that you use right now. Now, to begin with, let's talk about the chocolate industry. Right now, the chocolate industry is growing in Vietnam, especially because there is an increase in the disposable income. There is also an emergence of the middle class right now, so this is an opportunity for you since you're selling chocolate at a bit higher price. And thirdly, there is a market of 92.7 million. This is a big market to tap into and to expand right now. The industry is also very competitive with majority big players such as Mars and Nestle, but there's also Hershey and Ferrero. That being said, in order to compete with those big players there, you need to have something that sets you apart. This is why having sustainability as a core competency is something that really differentiates you from your competitors, and you should really push it forward. Ferrero, we just talked about Ferrero, is an example that we'd like to look at because 3P has already worked with this company, and we know that this company is a leader in sustainability in the chocolate industry. They take care from the beginning of the production to the end. They have really strong CSR goals, corporate social responsibility, goals, and they work really hard to achieve them. They set goals continuously, especially to have sustainable palm oil, sustainable sugar, cocoa, and hazelnuts. This company that works very well right now. Something that they also do is that they succeed at controlling in every step of the production. They start from the producers, they take care of them, and they also work throughout the distribution. They not just buy the product already fermented from another manufacturer. They work through every steps of the production, and this is something that we suggest you maybe should try to implement later on by actually working with the producers to have better control of the situation right now. Moving on, you have, like I've mentioned before, you have a very strong sustainability core. Your values include producing locally in Vietnam in terms of sustainability. That is very powerful. Not many companies currently do this. They more travel around the world depending on every phase of the production. You also pay twice as much as the industry average for cocoa beans. This is something great because especially for the economic aspect of the pillar of sustainability, it has a huge impact on the economy in Vietnam because you actually help people who work there for the country. Third, you have an exploration of the agroforestry model, which is also good, something that companies don't currently do that much, but that can differentiate you because I don't know if you've maybe seen it, there's a TED Talk that exists that talks about how trees talk to each other and how having trees cohabiting with other trees in a specific forest help trees grow even healthier and grow faster and like actually having trees that are in better health than other trees that grow just by themselves in big lands. And fourth, you have a vertical integration of the supply chain. This kind of goes back to other points that I've mentioned. This is why your sustainable operations, like we've mentioned previously, could differentiate you in the competitive market. Something else that is important to point out is that, are we really sure that sustainable products attract customers right now? Well, yes. There's a study that came out very recently that Accenture recently conducted. It's a study that proves that 63% of customers are willing to pay more. Are willing to pay more to purchase goods from companies that share their beliefs and values and actually care about sustainability. And more as years goes on, customers are starting to ditch other companies that don't actually share these values, which is very beneficial for your company right now. So this study again proves that your purpose is justified, and this should be even more solidified before moving forward because it is what makes you successful right now. Now I will pass it on to my colleague Emmanuel for the decision.
Thank you,
alternatives, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jean. So we look at analysis to be able to look at what alternatives are better for your company. In this case, in order to evaluate what alternatives are there, we decided to look at the decision criteria. The first decision criteria is actually Mario's values. You want to make sure that your corporate values are aligned with the initiatives you have to make sure that you have a strong and powerful initiative that will inspire people to go and continue to buy your products. Second of all, is implementation feasibility. Is it feasible to have certain places, to, for example, go into far places that you don't necessarily know? That's what we have to evaluate. Third place, long-term profitability. That is known. We want to make sure your company can succeed in the future. Here are our three alternatives for you. The first one would be to go actually on opening new stores. So looking into Vietnam, making sure that you have other chocolate bars to make sure to see if you can actually expand on this section. Second option is the immediate international market expansion. So looking at other countries that are actually looking for those kind of products, chocolates that are made in a sustainable manner, and how to work on that solution. Third alternative is actually improving your operations from the suppliers all the way to the customers to make sure that the whole process is done smoothly and coherently as well. As you can see here, there's a decision matrix that allows you to see how to measure this and find the best solution out of these three. As you can see in the legend right here, the 3 stars means that it is the most favorable, and 1 star means that it is least favorable. As you can see, opening new stores does not lead to the best alternative. Why? Because we already have one right now in Hanoi that is not working correctly or enough, that we should improve on. So it wouldn't be the best option to open a new one right now if we haven't fixed internal issues right now. Second option is international expansion. As stated in the case, it is a possibility, but we are not ready to discover these new markets because we have to understand the market there precisely, and studies have not been done by your company prior then, and so it shouldn't be the most strategic aspect to do, the reason why it is A5. And then improving operations show that it is the best alternative for you today. Why? Because you could match your values if you're able to incorporate things such as a CSR corporate value, a strategy internally. And as you can see, out of all the 3 alternatives, it is the strongest right here, and it is the one that should be more feasible to implement in the long run. So we're really happy to present you this alternative right here for you today, which is improving your operations in order to succeed in the future.
So what we recommend to you today is to restructure Maru's base. It's hard to run when you don't know how to walk. So what we want to make sure is that Maru first starts by making sure that its basic framework is in place so that when it starts expanding, it doesn't encounter a lot of issues. So for example, right now there is an issue with the fermenters not properly distributing the value-added money to the producers. And if a company was to expand while the middleman has issues, that's only going to create more issues in the future. So what we're trying to do is to eliminate it all from the base. So let me show you what we mean. So we're actually proposing 2 recommendations for you today, one from the beginning of the supply chain. What that means is that we have to make sure that you're purchasing both from the producers and the fermenters by separating the purchase costs. Because as we saw in successful models with Nestle, Ferrero, what they did was they created full traceability by actually controlling and understanding each level. So they don't actually have fermenters dictate how producers are paid. What that does is it actually produces traceability and allows for future expansion, because as your operations grow, you can actually create and find where improvements can be done, and with control of each level, that can be properly appropriated. And next, framework for long-term expansion. What this means is that you want to create a strong internal governance and CSR framework for your Maru House restaurants. It's really important to understand and have a framework that is uniform when you expand, so that you don't have issues as you saw in Hanoi from Ho Chi Minh. So we came here with 3 considerations today: the fairness of the value added to the producers and the limited control of cocoa supply. So our 3-pronged approach is that by separating the value added between fermenters and producers, you're actually going to have more direct control over both levels. Through this direct control, you can support your producers and fermenters to produce higher production through training, etc., which can give you forecasts of supplies, as you'll see later, and overall a better control of these operations. And next is our second recommendation, was the failure of Maison Maru's expansion. Now, what we believe the failure was linked to was the fact that there weren't proper internal controls and governance in place to ensure that everything you're actually instilling is uniform, and to make sure that you're hiring the right personnel to make the store as successful as your previous one. Now, let's take a look at the implementation at a glance. So what we actually have now is 2 implementations in parallel. Firstly, with the operations supply, so how we're going to deal with producers and fermenters, and second, how we plan on creating the framework for your internal controls and CSR. So in the short term, it's really about communicating. It's about making sure that you hire the right personnel to understand the needs, and then to write up the contracts for the fermenters and producers. Now, you're going to see, obviously, in the next few slides that fermenters do have their own interest, and so do producers, so you have to make sure and weigh the benefits for both. From there on, now that internally you have a framework that you want to establish for these employees, for the producers, it's about actually going there and implementing this operation. From there on out, the operations mainly focus on your producers and your fermenters, as the CSR framework that's set just needs to be monitored in the long run for your restaurant. So in the short term, it's about communication. Now, if you want to make sure that you understand the needs of your producers and fermenters, you have to have more personnel. Now, with 25 fermenters and even more producers, it's extremely important they have more personnel, because at the moment, you do have access to some producers, but many of them are managed by your fermenters. So you have to actually have the communication team be from locals and understand, and you actually need to understand that these fermenters, the people you're hiring, can actually instill this exact vision. So your values of sustainability and your goal of actually separating producers and fermenters. And then next is to write up contracts. So when it comes down to contracts, you really have to understand the benefits for both parties. Now, firstly, for you, the benefit is the fact that you're going to have higher yields, increased production capacity, better cocoa forecasting, because you're going to understand what the producers need, and ultimately, you're going to have increase of controls of raw materials for future expansion. And additionally, if you're to look at fermenters, you're no longer going to have an issue with the middleman, which is the fermenter, because they're now side by side with the producers, and you're actually looking over both. So you're not going to have the unfairness anymore. You're obviously going to have higher production fermentation volume. What that means is that because you're directly supporting the producers, you're actually going to be able to have more cocoa in tons for the fermenters. Now, one thing that we saw with the fermenters is that we think there's an issue that they do not want to cooperate, because for them, with such a high value added, they can distribute and send down as little money as they want to the producers and keep a higher profit. So by directly controlling them, you're going to see that they do not want to actually hand you over many of the producers. But as we said, there are benefits for both the producers and fermenters as well. For the cocoa producers, we're actually going to create training and support. So a lot of them right now need some of the training and support and could create better harvests. Now with this training and support, you're going to see higher motivation, which is going to lead to higher production. So for example, we talk a lot about agroforestry. Now a lot of farmers and producers, if they're not in cocoa, you can actually help them enter the cocoa market through agroforestry because they can actually farm two things that synergize, and then they can actually teach them safety. Alongside, right now their biggest issue is the low compensation they receive from the fermenters. So by actually directly contacting them, you give them a higher pay scale and a better compensation. And for the fermenters, well, the biggest problem for them was if you start paying them, the money that's not within the producer's money, what they're going to do is they're going to realize they might start receiving less money because the money is going to the producer as well. But the justification is if these producers do have a higher yield volume, they're going to be processing more, which means that they can maintain their revenue by the increased volume. Now, when it comes to operating, we can go through this in more detail in the Q&A, but it has to do with contacting producer contracts and pretty much bring it from the beginning to the end, which I'll go in more detail. But one of the main things you have to know for the producers is that with so many, they're scattered around the area, but you can consolidate them into clusters, so the larger clusters with the larger yields can go through the training program first so that it's more efficient. Next, I'll pass it to my teammate again for the CSR and internal.
Thank you, Roland. So now that we looked at this, it's important to look more at the CSR internally to see how we can evaluate and align corporate values with initiatives. If we start, for example, looking at a simplified model, we can look at it to start looking at corporate governance, social responsibility, economic growth, as well as environmental awareness. Now, if you focus on particular subjects such as social responsibility and strong corporate governance, your current situation in your stores are going to be able to improve slightly better and as well attract people that are, as stated in the analysis, attracted towards products that are sustainable and that are leaning towards initiatives that people love to see, that allow this world to become a better place. Let's have a concrete example of how it would look like, and we'll show you how it's all implemented. But you can go with the COSO framework.
So the COSO framework is actually an internal controls framework set by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or in Canada, 52109 bill. What it is a law that ensures that there's proper compliance with regulations, but on top of compliance and regulations, the best yield from the COSO framework is the fact that it actually helps businesses achieve their operational goals by understanding and identifying risks and then eliminating it. So it starts from the control environment, which is Maru's position. So your goal is to make sure that during these expansions for the restaurant, they understand the values of the value added. So the fact that you have a different chocolate and that you want to provide to the communities. Next, risk assessment. Well, one of the risks we really identified with the Hanoi's expansion failure was the fact that many of the employees were just hired locally. They didn't understand what Maru was, what they were trying to accomplish. So you can definitely see lower motivational levels, and you can definitely see that there's risks if you're trying to expand the business elsewhere. You really want to hire the right personnel. So what does that entail? It entails employees that were previously working in Ho Chi Minh, or even your internal Maru managers to come in and make sure that the tone is set. Next, the control activities is just to monitor and support the risks, and information communication is about ensuring that all levels are communicating from the management to the managers to the frontline employees, and monitoring activities are certain activities that I can explain in Q&A of how you can ensure that everything is being worked fully in these restaurants.
Here we have a model for social responsibility that you can apply to your business. If you have any more questions, we can always come back to this section, which can allow you to understand better how to work directly with your employees. Now, we also had in plan a marketing strategy, so you can show once you have social responsibility in place and structure within your company, and you have a strong corporate governance, and it's all about sharing and showing to the world how you've been able to implement these initiatives in it. We can again come back to our marketing strategy if you have more questions.
Now our mandate today was to provide you with a solution to further expand and increase your production. We arrived with a solution that is more in order to solidify the core of your business before actually expanding, because we believe that this is really what is going to differentiate you and give you a competitive advantage in the future. And this is the sustainable success that we were talking about at the beginning of our presentation. Thank you very much, and we open the floor to questions in English ou en français.
Question period can now begin.
A lot of work in your presentation, eh? A lot of material in your slide. Great job. I'd like to go further on the business development plan, internationally speaking. I mean, you have been working a lot with farmers, with fermenters. What's your goal about business developing the Meru chocolate internationally?
The way we see it is that we prefer actually solidifying the base right now, because what we saw with the Hanoi expansion is that when you expanded there were things that weren't working correctly, and that made you like at a disadvantage because of it. So what we want to do is to really solidify and then expand more. But your current expansion strategy is great, but before opening new stores, we prefer to solidify this and afterwards moving forward. Afterward, open more stores.
Okay.
What do we do with the Maison Meru in Hanoi? Do we close it?
And so we were evaluating the different solutions. Again, what we believe strongly is that if there is a strong corporate governance internally that can allow to fix your operations, then your store could be able to work. And with a marketing strategy, attracting new clients to that store might be able to make it work in the long term. The reason why we didn't have full time to go through it, but if you have more questions, we can answer them.
So the governance will drive more customers in our maison in Hanoi. You think so?
Well, it's a few more steps than that. So
Yeah,
essentially,
yes.
once the framework is in place, what it's going to tell us is potentially you need probably more employees in practice that do understand Meru's values, who made Ho Chi Minh a success. Now, by transporting some of these employees, by transporting some of the managers, they're actually going to make sure that the employees provide the customers with the full experience first. Once this customer service and customer satisfaction is in place, you can definitely see growth in Hanoi in the future.
You were talking about international, so you don't want to expand too much because you want to do it the proper way, but what are you doing with all the markets that we already have? Is there something specific for them?
We've been seeing that you're planning on going internationally right now with the stores you're working when you're exporting is actually running well. We think that by having, again, a structure that's more stronger internally, you'll be able to implement it even internationally and have even more sales will grow eventually. So your strategy is not wrong on the right direction, which is planning on implementing step by step.
We also have the CSR and the marketing approach that Emmanuel didn't have time to cover maybe enough for you to understand. I don't know if you want him to like cover it maybe more. Emmanuel, if you want to.
Do you have any questions when it comes?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So we were talking in particular, for example, for the marketing aspect, it's just showing again how for you the importance of quality and working directly with suppliers, or for example, with your employees was something really important. So the way we were trying to see it is, as we saw the market is actually growing, there's new emerging markets, and there's even millennials that are ready to buy products that they care about what the company is actually doing, right? So for example, the message could be care about employees and our supplies is Meru's way of providing superior chocolate. So really showing how this is important. And even in other markets, such as the US, even France or Canada, show a lot of interest in sustainable measures. So we think that's how you can also grow in the future.
That's probably where, because one of the questions that we have is, we're investing a lot in CSR. What basically your recommendations are to increase the investment in CSR, but staying in Vietnam, consolidating Vietnam, and after that go big and go international. But at the same time, the question that we have is, are Vietnamese really concerned about CSR? They are concerned. They love chocolate. They love chocolate. They love good chocolate. But are they really? Is there a fit between the Vietnamese needs, the customer needs, and the investment that we're making in terms of CSR? Isn't it for more the international market that we're investing in CSR?
So the way we saw it was that Meru has an extreme emphasis on the value of CSR, and currently most of its operations is in Vietnam. So if you're to expand internationally, you have to bring internationally and show them what you've done previously. If you don't have enough CSR in place in Hanoi, in Vietnam, when you go ahead to these international markets and show them, oh, I'm a corporately socially responsible company, it might be seen as greenwashing and it can damage your reputation. So
That's good.
Good point.
Okay.
Last question?
Me, I'm good. I don't have any.
Good too.
I'm
Yeah,
good too.
we're done.
Thank you very much.